In this movie we're going to take a look at creating coloured elevations or advanced colour elevation using image fills. We're going to start with one of our elevations and then we're going to migrate into a worksheet and then keep working in the worksheet to produce something that would previously had to have been done in something like Photoshop to produce an artistic presentation style elevation drawing. We've got a simple model here and this is the elevation. Obviously the elevation of this building is a representation of our model, all being 3D objects. So whatever I select here are actually walls with associated materials and fills with them. And this is probably not the best place to start applying image fills to the model. We want to keep this elevation quite clean and create a presentation in a separate window. To start with, I'm going to go to the settings and in uncut elements I'm going to set the display of the elevations to use fills of its own materials, not shaded, and then hit OK. That'll give us a good starting point in distinguishing which fill should look like what and where the walls start and where they finish, etc. The next thing that I'm going to do is create a worksheet so that we can work on this elevation as a 2D drawing rather than cluttering this live view. So I'll just make a worksheet there and there it is there, so that's what it looks like. But back in our elevation we probably don't want the marker to be seen, so I'm just going to select that, go to the settings and under marker say no marker. Push OK. So we've got our documentation there, how we want it to be. I'm just going to turn off the shading, and so this could be our documentation view again. And there's my worksheet where I can, now I'm just going to go back to the elevation settings and turn off the shading. So this becomes our documentation set, and I've created a separate worksheet. The worksheet is no longer a 3D drawing, it's basically a set of hatches and fills. And as this was saved to the worksheet as fills and hatches, it's easier to select the fills and replace them with what we want. Now I'll just be able to replace those hatches in a more controlled way. First I'll start cleaning up the drawing a little bit just by removing some of these lines. Obviously you can add or remove as much information as you want. There's some stuff that we probably don't need. First thing I'm going to do is create a few image materials, which is one of the new things in ArchiCAD 12. So if we go to Options, Element Attributes and go to Fill Types, and normally in the fill types you have all sorts of colour fills, drafting fills, and the new category that's been added to the end, which is image fills. This is the type of fill that allows you to use an image, a JPEG or any other type of raster file as a fill, which is in a way similar to how materials work, but this allows you to use it in 2D without the need to go into 3D. So I'm just going to add a new fill, and I need to select image fill, and over here I'm going to start by calling this stacked stone. Push OK, and then I'm presented by the fill types dialog box, and to the bottom of there's fill texture, so we can load an image into this. Now the images can be loaded either from the existing library where I've preloaded a few images through the library manager, or you can also add images directly from the file dialog box, which are loaded into the library. Maybe I'll use this one at the moment. So I'll pick this one. So just like in the material dialog box, the texture shows in this window here. You can set up the sample preview to show 2x2, 3x3, 4x4, That means that there are 4 images across and 4 images vertically as well. And you can also define which way the images are tiled or mirrored. For this particular image, the first one seems to work the best. Keep original proportions. Now this is a square image, 256 by 256 pixels. And the last thing we have to set is the image size in actual millimeters on the model. So for the sake of appearance, I may set this one to say 1800 by 1800. At 1800 by 1800, at 1 by 1, assumes that this image would cover an area of 1800 by 1800 on the model. And on the screen we can obviously set up our own hatch pattern or drafting fill, which I won't spend much time doing at the moment, but we don't want to spend too much time on that. So that's going to be my screen preview. You probably want it a little bit more accurate than that. So that's okay. And that way I have actually created a fill pattern which I can use to produce a presentation type drawing. Now when the worksheet is created, the fills that come through actually don't allow you to select, and this is invisible, I'll just move this over a little bit. The fills don't actually allow us to convert them to image fills. So what we really have to do is create areas of the fills more or less manually. I'm going to pick one of the, I'm going to click on the fill icon and go down to one of the new image fills. I'm going to use my stack stone, of course, and I'm going to use the space bar to trace this area, and since I've done that, it's actually done. Now our existing fills are actually sitting on top, so I should select that. I'm going to select that white fill and delete it. Then you'll see our new fill has actually been created. I'm going to replace this fill. I'm just going to delete it first this time, and I'm just going to create another fill. I'm going to say new fill type. Once again, a new image fill. Custom orb silver. Push OK, and I'm going to load an image, which is exactly this one. Again, I can check which mirroring method is the best, and once again I'm going to use the first one. I'm going to set the size to 750 by 750 millimeters on the actual elevation. Again, once again, I could change the screen pattern if I wanted to. And then I'll push OK. And once again, I'm just going to use the space bar to insert it. I'm going to choose the custom orb fill and click enter, and then it's done. Then I'm going to move the building over. I could also cover this wall over here, so I'm just going to delete that original fill, and maybe this time I might just use the rectangular tool, and there it is. When you're inserting these images as fills, it's important to at some point go and have a very good look at what is covering what. So just going to bring that to the front so the fills can actually cover other objects. Maybe I might just send this all the way to the back so that this object is in front, which is correct like that. Another way of dealing with using image fills in ArchiCAD would be to convert existing fills like this one into a fill that can actually be used as an image fill. Images can only be used in image fills when it's actually a drafting fill. Any fills that actually come from the elevation using the worksheet actually come across as cover fills. That's why they can't be used as image fills. If I wanted to quite quickly replace this beige wall with an image fill, I could first convert the type of the fill to a drafting fill and then replace it from the dialog box. I've chosen this one on purpose because what's happening here is that this large fill is cut up by the balustrade which is in front of it, and we'd have to select every single bit of fill between the railings, or we could use the find and select tool, and that would probably be the fastest way. So I'm going to hit select and have a look at the properties of the fill. It tells us that the pen color is actually pen 70, but this is using a solid fill that's called airspace. So by changing this fill doesn't actually change the color of the fill, purely because the color that you see here is defined by the background color. Unfortunately, the background color is not a color which belongs to our, or doesn't conform to our pen sets. So we see this little icon here showing us the RGB icon, and the pen number is recorded or reported here as -2 RGB color. So we can't select this by its color. However, the pen number, even though it's actually being used in terms of the display here, is still being used internally. So what we can do is go to find and select, or Command F, hit the fill, pick the pen color as the criteria, and make sure we use the color that's shown there, which is 70, hit plus, and then it's selected all of our fills using this pen color are now selected, even all the time consuming ones to select. So now we go to the fill setting, convert it from a cover fill to a drafting fill, hit OK, and while it's still selected, replace it with a fill which I've prepared earlier called textured render, and deselect it, and you'll see that an existing hatch has been replaced with an image fill. The last thing we're going to do to this elevation at the moment is replace the green fill on our windows. We're going to replace this with a gradient fill just to make this look a little bit more glassy or glossy, whatever you want to call it. Once again, we're going to use it's pen 245, copy and paste that into there, select it using the find and select tool, and we can't just convert this fill to a gradient fill purely because the gradient would repeat itself in every single panel. So what we'll have to do there is delete it. This big fill here, which fills our wall, obviously needs some holes cut out, so select it, click on the fill tool, use the rectangular tool, and cut the holes out for windows like so. And then I'm just going to create a standard drafting fill using a linear gradient. For the linear gradient tool, I'm just going to get a fairly light blue, going to a dull darkish blue, and using the rectangular tool once again, I'm just going to draw a rectangle, and might just edit the gradient, set some sort of angle through here, and that's looking pretty acceptable. Then by using the eyedropper tool, copy the properties of this fill and apply it to the other windows. First of all, I've got to create the fill, and this fill can actually be slightly larger than the area that you need to cover, because it can also be hidden or send it to back, changing the order of it. And for example, for these three windows here, I'm just going to create one fairly large fill, and then I'm just going to change the angle of it, and then right mouse click on it and display order, send to back, and then it'll only be seen through the openings.